in a very short period of time, you go from hero to zero, literally. So you were kind of the coolest company in the world, and then, you were struggling to survive.
TomTom is a pretty unique company in the world of mapping. It's maybe one of a handful of companies related to maps that most people in the world have heard about. If you had a car in the mid-2000s, chances are you had one of their navigation devices on your windshield. But of course, if you look into cars today, that really isn't the case anymore. The iPhone got introduced in 2007. Around the same time, Google gives away navigation for free in Google Maps, and 2008 gave way to a financial crisis. I've been looking forward to this conversation with Harold Goddijn, one of the co-founders and the CEO of TomTom, for a long time. We talked about the many pivots the company had to make, going through really high highs and very low lows, and then what mapping looks like today. Before that, this episode is sponsored by SkyFi. I talk a lot about satellite imagery on this podcast and how many people use them for all sorts of applications. Though one of the biggest challenges surrounding these satellite images is still just getting your hands on them. It's so far usually been a hassle of prices not being upfront or having to get on a sales call before buying any images. SkyFi wants to change that. They're partnering with many of the imagery providers to make it as easy as possible for anyone to just use their credit card and buy imagery, either tasking a new area or ordering from a catalog of existing data. This is what buying satellite imagery should always really have been like: clear and upfront pricing and availability. If you want to easily buy satellite imagery, SkyFi is quickly becoming the place to go. So head over to skyfi.com. They've also recently announced the support for free and open data on their platform. Specifically, they're starting with Sentinel-2, so if you want to get some free images or pay for some higher resolution ones, SkyFi is the place to go. I start these the same way every single time. I've had nearly over 50 people on this podcast now. I always ask them how they would describe themselves. I'm quite curious, how would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? I think it's, if I describe myself as, I can describe myself as a father and a family man and whatnot. And that's all very important to me. But I think what has been the most impactful side of and most important thing of my development, apart from raising kids and all the rest of that, is probably being an entrepreneur. And figuring out what that means and how that, and what makes entrepreneurs and what makes them fail, what makes them successful and so on. Certainly in the context of what we're discussing today about maps and navigation and location-based services, that is... So the technology is great, and I'm not a technologist. I'm more on the business side than on the technology side. Doesn't mean that I don't understand technology. I've built up a broad understanding of tech over the years, and so on and so forth. But I see myself mostly as an entrepreneur. Bringing people together and money and tools and things and ideas and trying to make sense of all that.
Right. So do you think in another life you could have been still an entrepreneur, just in something completely different, not tech at all?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. So tech was so I'm older by comparison to probably your audience and whatnot. I was born in 1960, and tech was not really a term. Didn't exist. There was technology and PCs and things were evolving, and they were evolving quite rapidly. Not as rapidly as they're evolving today, but there was still progression and new ideas and whatnot. And I was attracted by the speed already by which things were changing at the time already. And the type of people that attracted, and the thinking and the creativity and the kind of the energy that came with that business and that industry, that attracted me. And that was because I had no prior knowledge to to any of that. But it attracted me, and I liked that, and I learned to work with companies that were in the tech sphere, and I liked that culture and the people, and I was really attracted to that.
When I was looking around, I think you studied economics first, and so you said you're not a technologist as well. How do you end up leading a company that is very much centered around the tech? When you describe yourself not as
the bridge is product.
Okay.
So the bridge is product. I'm not a technologist, but I do consider myself as a product guy.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Product is at the end of the day where everything is coming together, and and the product needs to serve a purpose, and needs to there needs to be a demand for product, and that product needs to be meaningful and do something that is important to a lot of people. It needs to solve a problem, ideally. And that is where I've always had a keen interest.
Right.
So the product side of things always had a keen interest. And I was lucky. I worked with and the co-founders of TomTom were computer scientists, and were friends and whatnot. They had a very clear view on software and software development and whatnot. And they also took the time and made the effort to explain it to me. And I was so typically in the first decade, or maybe even longer, I was kind of the product guy, and there was a lot happening in terms of product without me knowing it and understanding it and testing it and going about it and selling it, and I've always liked that.
So what were the first products that you started working on? The reason I'm asking is I'm thinking of the early days of TomTom. I think it started in 91.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like there was a lot of searching at first of what this company was.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like in the early days?
Yeah, so it started at university. When I was at university, I was responsible for a financial administration of a student association, and that was all done manually. And I was a little bit lazy. I thought, I must be ways to automate this. And that was the time when MS-DOS came along and computers came along, and you could buy software. And then, so I automated the collection of the fees. I liked that, it was a big success, and met my future business partners in that role. They helped out, they did stuff and whatnot. So that's where I think the seeds for an interest in technology and product started. I was then after a brief intermediate period as a venture capital in venture capital business, I started to engage with a British company called Scion. And they were brilliant. They had a lot of innovation in handheld devices. And they came out with the Scion organizers. They created a concept of an organizer, digital assistant. Created an operating system. Were successful in their space in the 90s. And the immediate reason to start TomTom was to develop software development capabilities for that platform. First in the enterprise market. There was a nascent kind of industry for meter reading and barcode reading and order entry and stock taking and that kind of stuff. So we had some experiments there and made some money and learned about business and things. Then we switched our interest to the consumer side, so the retail side. And there was an installed base of those devices, and later an installed base of Palm Pilot devices. And then the Windows tablets came along, and they added a bit of installed base. So we started to develop, quite generic software. Some of it came just out of research. And then we said, we put it in a box, try to make a bit of money. Others were more serious attempts to create something meaningful. So we developed the first bookkeeping application for those handheld devices. It didn't exist, and we did that, and it was a success. And and there we could see the interaction between software and hardware, because we did this software, and the software was also driving the hardware sales. So you could see kind of the things that were happening, learning about distribution and packaging and marketing and customer service and all the rest of that, operations and all that things. And then halfway through the 90s, we started to engage with digital mapping, which was it was a business that didn't exist for mobile devices. You had a product from Microsoft, Route Planner, which was distributed on CD-ROM. Did a bit of route planning, high level, and then you could make a print and take that with you on your journey. So people kind of used that, right. And we thought, well, it would be good to do that on a mobile device, and that's how we learned about data compression. Those databases were very big. The data carriers were very expensive and limited in capacity. There were all sorts of compromises you had to do.
And it's on like a small device, right? We're still on the...
We're still on the handheld devices, in particular the Psion PDAs, personal digital assistants.
Why mapping? Like, it seems like you were trying a lot of different applications. To me, the image that comes to mind directly is kind of the App Store today, like where we have this hardware platform, which is the iPhone, or just smartphones in general, but for the sake of the argument, the iPhone. And then there are people that come in and don't touch hardware at all, just bring in software. From what I understand, this is what you were doing early on, even before that happened, and experimenting with different applications.
Yeah, there were no app stores. There was no internet even. So you had to distribute your products physically on a carrier,
right,
on a CD or a floppy disk.
Right. So even if it was software, there's still this hardware component. Actually.
Well, there was a physical dimension to distribution.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but indeed, we tried various things, and it was a nascent business, and we were 5 or 6 people all together in TomTom. And
very small.
Very small. A bit more, maybe 10. But and we tried different things, and some things were really ridiculous, and other things were kind of quite useful. But what we did do, we were always careful about on the product side. Again, were kind of, we didn't do, it wasn't all very well informed. We just tried things, but we cared. We cared for product and for customers, and we wanted to make things look good and easy to operate. And we had an early discipline, we didn't want one pixel to be in the right place. Even if it was primitive, even if there were not that many pixels available anyway, we wanted those pixels to be in the right place. And it's funny to see how that works, because it does create a brand, right. Even if it is a small brand, and even if it's all not very meaningful, but people do recognize if a product is created and built with passion and love for detail. And we learned that early on. And it was also an internal motivation to do things in the right way, with all the constraints we had. And that laid kind of the foundation of a culture and a desire to do things right, for the right reason. And that's an important one, because that gives you a North Star. And it doesn't matter if you're small or big or growing or declining or whatnot. If you have a North Star, and that North Star is, I do the right thing for the right reason, that can give you a lot of direction and help with difficult decisions and whatnot. It's not always easy, and not seldom it's black and white, but having a North Star, doing the right things and doing them for the right reasons was an important kind of muscle that we built in those early years. And then mapping came along, and that was a hard problem because of the data component, and we wanted to do that right as well. So we started simple, but we paid a lot of attention to data compression and UI, and we got something working, and it didn't. immediately crack the market or anything like it. It was, but it gave us kind of an entry into that world, and started gathering some feedback, and of all the things we've done and tried in the past, this was showing consistent growth and excitement and interest into the market. So there was a good combination. There's a good fit between, which is obviously with hindsight, but at the time wasn't. But there is a good fit, of course, between location and a mobile device, just by the pure simplicity that you have a mobile device where you need, and you need to get access to those maps in that location when you are out and about, not behind your desk. And that was, and that became clear very quickly. And we kept developing in that direction.
Because you see that there's some feedback, there's some
potential
feedback,
there's traction, there's excitement, people like it.
Right. And you've built a culture at that point as well. Like regardless of what the product is, it seems like you've already figured out how to work. Yeah,
how to work together. Okay. And we kind of figured out what those roles, when there were no books available to read about, there was no product management. Product management was not a recognized trade or capability that came much later. But we had already figured out that we need a product role, an engineer role, marketing role, sales role. And we had good people in all those different, despite the small size of the operation, we had covered all the angles. And that turned out to be critical when the whole thing started to fly. That we had all those trusted people, those capable people, covering all those different angles. And that is what VCs then later called the quality of the team. When the whole startup scene came along, people started to invest in those ideas. They started to look at the quality of teams, and we had that kind of organically. We had a great team. We didn't know that it was important because there were no books about it, but it was. But what we did know is that decision making was easy. We didn't need long meetings. If someone said something, then we kind of followed. It was very efficient. It was a great team. Yeah.
So you start figuring out there's something to mapping here.
Yeah.
So you keep going, but it seems like a lot of technical hurdles.
Yes.
To figure out. Sounds like a hard but good problem.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of technical hurdles. So you had, well, first of all, processing power in its own right. You couldn't even run a washing machine anymore, the kind of processes that we used at the time. Then you didn't have a lot of real estate to project your image. So LCDs were kind of primitive, monochrome.
Yeah.
So you had that thing. You didn't have GPS. It was there, but it was not public service. It was kind of scrambled. You didn't have devices with built-in GPS receivers.
That changed around the 2000, if I recall correctly.
2000 and a bit.
Yeah.
Or 2000, maybe just before 1999, or around that time, you started to see the first kind of GPS devices. But the most important hurdle was the cost of memory.
Okay.
When we started in the early 90s, we were talking about 16 kilobyte and then 32 kilobytes and 256 kilobyte. And, if you had a database with addresses, you would advertise your product capabilities in the number of addresses it could hold.
How do you solve
that? Well, you can't. The industry needs... No, you can't. Well, you can. So what we did... So we had quite a high-level maps, map data that was quite primitive. But there was also an emerging industry of high-quality maps for cars and navigation. And we looked at that data And it was very dense and high quality and whatnot. And we wanted to use that for mapping products, and yet not even navigation products, but initially for mapping products. And of course, it was the memory size exploded. There was no way of holding that. And we cut the map in. We were city maps basically. You could download a map of Amsterdam or of Berlin,
right.
or Paris or London, and that is how we initially cracked that. Then we started to, and then in the early 2000s, there was word of packet switch data over a normal telecoms network. Term smartphone was coined around that time. And we started to think about putting the data on a central server and accessing them through a mobile device over a wireless connection. So we built products for that.
So rather than having everything on device, because the memory storage was the bottleneck, we put the data somewhere else, and then we just transfer it, because that starts becoming possible.
Yeah,
right?
Technically that was possible.
When are we talking about in terms
This
of?
This is 99.
Okay, right.
Everybody was very excited, and there was 3G coming, and 3G had inherent capabilities for packet switch data transfer, and it was going to be the future, and nothing would ever look the same ever again. Now, and we kind of, and this is the importance of timing, of course. So we kind of we were kind of that's good. We're going to do all that. And we spend if not everything, all of our development capabilities on that, on getting that to work. And of course, we got the timing wrong.
What do you mean, of course? It was too early?
Well, that's the big problem for every entrepreneur, is get the timing right.
Right.
And it's very hard to get it right. But anyway, we were too early. So we got it to work technically. It wasn't, kind of worked nicely, and people were impressed. Oh, this is one of the first kind of meaningful mobile wireless applications, client server architecture, the whole shooting match. Ericsson was at the time very important provider of infrastructure equipment. They wanted to have our babies, and they wanted to work together. And Nokia wanted to do the same thing. And we're going to do all this and all the rest of that. And we're going to do joint ventures. And we go, there's a whole load of excitement.
So that is the data providers to be able to transfer the data.
Well, those were the network equipment providers and handset manufacturers.
Because now you need to rely on those.
And they were looking for meaningful applications. They could see all those investments taking place in data, and there was nothing to show for,
Right.
So they were looking for meaningful applications that could demonstrate kind of the power and the potential of wireless data, packet switch data. I say packet switch, and everybody, nobody uses the terms anymore because everything is packet switch. At the time, you only had dial-up connections, like a fax and all that kind of thing. You had to establish a connection end-to-end and then transfer data, do error corrections, resend stuff and whatnot. And the whole idea of just firing off packets in the ether was exciting. So, and that was cool. And we did a lot of cool stuff, and we went places, and we started to talk to all those big boys, the network operators and the Vodafones of this world. We're a small outfit, so that was kind of...
How many people? You said the big boys. How many people was TomTom at that time?
Probably 30, 40 people, I reckon.
Okay. Compared to these huge companies, right?
There's huge, arrogant bastards out there.
I take it from your speech that it didn't work out.
Well, so it was kind of interesting. So those were big boys. So both on the network operators and the equipment manufacturers and handset manufacturers. They were kind of ruling the world. There was a bit of a European thing. We had the standards, the GSM standard. Those businesses were spitting out cash like there was no tomorrow. Everybody wanted to deal with them. And it was not easy to get in that orbit and to start to talk business at that level. They were very arrogant as well because they were ruling the world and they owned the customers. And you had all that bullshit and the walled garden concept of we decide who gets into the garden and who doesn't get into the garden because we own the customer. You had all that nonsense going on. And it was very hard to break through because they were defending that space like, with their life.
Is that part of the too early, do you think? Or you?
Well, so that it was part of it too early, but it took a long time for someone to stand up and clean that whole story out and straighten that out. And that company, of course, was Apple.
Right.
But it took another 8 years.
But in between then, you released your own, I think 2004, if I recall correctly, is the first hardware. I think it was the TomTom Go.
Yeah.
So if that had storage on board, if I understood correctly. So that's a big pivotal switch again in if I got the date right, 2004. That's like 5 years later.
4 years.
4 years, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happened in between is that, so you had I think it was 2000, you had those auctions, government-led auctions for spectrum, for the 3G frequencies.
Right.
And that was a big success for governments and a big disaster for the industry because the prices, no one could afford not to play. And the prices for those licenses went through the roof. And when the dust had settled, everybody started to count their money and said, oh, shit, we've paid too much. And now we need to run the business for cash. And now we need to do this and need to do that. So the whole, and that was the beginning of that was what we then now call, I think, the first burst, the burst of the first internet bubble.
Right, .com.
There was a huge amount of excitement. There was a lot of capital flowing. And from one day to the next, it kind of dried up. And everybody went belly up. And just before that, people wanted money for them to show up at an interview, at a job interview. It was a crazy time. And that turned around really quickly. And money dried up. People were getting back to work. Level of realism started to kick in. A lot of people lost their shirt. A lot of companies went belly up. And we also went through a very difficult patch because our whole investment in wireless, was useless.
So you were affected by that directly?
Yeah. So first of all our kind of fancy partnerships with all those kind of big guys came to an end.
I see.
So one after the other, hey, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but we stop our collaboration. We need to focus on other things, nothing personal, but we were kind of left high and dry. We had to make half of our employees redundant. We didn't have a product strategy anymore. It was tough. And we also nearly kind of, because we had been on it for 10 years without a real breakthrough. And at some point you think, are we still on the right track? And luckily we decided to give it the last chance and to give one more go. And we injected a bit of money, a bit of our own money. We had negative equity at the time. We picked up our old skills of doing embedded software. We created the first software-based navigation application for mobile devices. That gave us a huge shot in the arm. So we saw our revenue growing from 1 year to the next, from 2.5 million, if I remember correctly, to 42 million the next year.
Right.
A lot of profitability fell through, and that was 2002. 2, I think, and that's when we decided to go into hardware. It took us, I think, 14 months or something like that to come up with a hardware design. In 2004, we were ready to launch, and that kind of, then we got an extra level of acceleration.
Yeah.
In the revenue.
And that happened really quickly then. If from 2001 you have to let go half the company, and then a year after that you're 10xing the revenue.
Yeah.
2 years after that, things really kick off even more. That's very quick, actually.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's quite the challenge to handle a company that must be growing so much as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not easy. It's fun. A lot more fun than managing a downsize.
Yeah.
But it also comes with its own challenges, and you're never smart enough to enjoy the moment. You always worry about the next thing that can go wrong. So it was quite a stressful period. And I can't say it was a fun time at all. We're proud that we broke out and that the business was going well. But below the surface, man, it was kind of all hands at the pump to keep that ship afloat. The whole thing of logistics at scale and hardware manufacturing and test and quality and brand and it was all... we were all drinking from a fire hose. But it was cool. It was fun. It was a fun time. In hindsight, certainly. But we walked, it wasn't all that easy. Not that many people or companies successfully transition from software to hardware, the other way around.
Yeah.
Different skills, a different culture, and but we managed to bring teams together that could cover all the different angles of hardware and hardware manufacturing and quality control, logistics, operations, and returns, and customer service, and all the rest of that. So it was a good time. It was a good time. And then we, from the moment we launched, I think, so we came from a revenue of, I think, 40 million when we built hardware and we started to ship that. We moved the revenue to nearly 200 million, and then to whatever, 600, 900, 1.2, 1.3 billion, all in a short period of time. So yeah, it was... That doesn't happen that often. And the other thing was really funny, obviously, again with hindsight, is that no one had, because we went along, especially when the going went tough, we also wanted to have some capital, some investors too, because it was the thing, but nobody wanted to touch us with a barge pole. And when people started to show an interest, we didn't need them anymore because the business was generating so much cash that it wasn't, we didn't need anyone. And when we floated in 2005, we IPO'd. We didn't have any external financing.
Okay.
So there's also not been shown. I don't think anybody has pulled that off. I think that you could only do that at a time. That's not possible anymore.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think, because in the mapping world, I think Esri is I don't think they went public though. They're still privately owned, but they are also quite famous for not having taken investment. But it's also one of the older companies in this field. And so I'm curious what you think. Do you think that is a feature of the time? Do you think like it would still be possible, specifically in these very technical heavy fields?
No, I don't think that. Well, it's just difficult to generalize, but what we pulled off between 2000 and 2005, we cannot do that anymore.
Right.
Period.
Why not?
Because the demands, the consumers have much higher expectations now than they had at the time. And to meet those expectations, the upfront investments are just crazy these days. And you're competing now in a completely different environment. You compete with Apple and Google and Samsung and all that silicon is completely unaffordable to have that in a dedicated device. So what you're seeing is there was kind of a rich kind of world of all sorts of funny devices and electronics. That's all it's all been mopped up in the form of applications running on mobile phones.
So the iPhone comes out in 2007.
Yeah.
I think 2007 was quite a rough year for TomTom.
I think 2008,
okay.
A year later,
there's like
perhaps,
this lag.
Was a rough period, beginning of a rough period, actually. So what happened is, a couple of things happened at the same time. So we had, first of all, we had the iPhone coming, and the iPhone itself was kind of okay-ish, but that opened. But then the upfront investment to compete in navigation were kind of dramatically lowered. You could only do the software.
Yeah, because you don't need to sell that hardware and manufacture it. Right. Back to the PDA, actually, of earlier.
Yeah. And so the barrier to entry became much lower. Secondly, soon after that, we had Google and Google Maps making all their services available free of charge.
So navigation becomes free.
So navigation becomes free on much more powerful hardware platforms. Then we had a financial crisis on top of that. So we were facing a very tough period where everybody was running their business for cash. So all the inventory that was everywhere was kind of run down. So nothing was ordered. We had a period of 6 months or so when we hardly took any orders. Didn't mean our business had dried up or didn't exist anymore, but they were not translated into orders, or very few. We had a lot of debt on the balance sheet. We had just bought Taliatlas, the map maker. So that's probably the period in the history of our company when we will at our most vulnerable.
Yeah, I can imagine. What was that like?
So it changes the perspective, of course, dramatically. So from in a very short period of time, you go from hero to zero, literally. So you were kind of the coolest company in the world, and then you were struggling to survive. Certainly at birthday parties and everything, and the narrative started to change very, very quickly. People really felt sorry for us. Mm. But that's the outside perspective that, and we had learned not to, on the way up, we had learned not to pay too much attention to it. And that came in handy on the way down.
I see.
Where we also didn't care too much about what the neighbors were thinking. So that didn't bother me too much. But the real question was, of course, what now? What are we going to do now?
Yeah.
And are we going to survive, and how, and where, and whatnot, and what do we need to do? And that was, and I think, quite frankly, we didn't have all the answers. What we did know is that we had to reduce our cost, that we had to renew our technology base. So a lot of our technology was designed for PDAs and didn't scale very well. So there was quite a bit of technical debt. There's another lesson. If everything goes well, if you think thing going well, they probably don't go as well as you think. And we figured it out on the way down because, every time we had a problem on the technical side, we kind of threw money at it because there was enough. Never really take a serious approach to paying down debt, technical debt.
Right.
We could see return on our development efforts reducing. It was getting harder and harder to introduce new features, getting your software to run on other platforms. So we were in trouble. And somehow we figured a way out. So we kept our cool, restructured the balance sheet, started to restructure our technical, our code base in a significant way, started to spend more time in the automotive industry, did an acquisition in automotive, started to become successful in enterprise sales, keeping the lights on in the retail business was important.
Right.
That was still fueling the cash flow, gave us time to, because the products were very good, and they were, and people started buying them again after the initial scare in 2008, financial crisis.
Yeah,
And there was that people would continue to buy them in large numbers. This is not that we. So that gave us time and bought us time to get the house in order and to reset the business. And we found a discipline, I think, and somehow the belief and the kind of the commitment to sit it through, and we stayed together as a team. That was, and it was, and then actually it's not so bad. You just once you kind of have decided what you want to do, you go and do it, and that's what we did. So it's good.
All these things happened in 2008, which kind of feels like a lot, to be honest. It's not one thing, it's like many different things going on. And then you say you didn't really know what the product was anymore. But then you just mentioned once you'd figured out what to do, you focus on that. How did you find what that focus was? And I'm guessing it's still thinking in terms of the product. What becomes the product that TomTom works on?
So we could see the limitations. So due to the pressure from smartphones and in particular free maps and free navigation, we had already started a shift to business to business.
So you saw it coming in a way.
We knew it was coming because we
Right.
had tried it in 2000 ourselves, and we got the timing wrong, but we knew it was coming. And the only surprising thing that it took the industry so late
Okay.
For it to come.
You thought it would be way earlier than that.
Well, yeah, we did. Yeah, we
Interesting.
thought this was going to happen in 2002, 2003, 2004.
So you're kind of
And
in the
it
back of your
didn't.
head is still,
Yeah.
this is going to come eventually. I
So
see.
we were not completely unprepared, and we had done some work for diversification, and we started to be active in fleet management and some business to business. We had bought a automotive business to start an entry into the OEM world. But it was all kind of a sideshow because the retail was so important, so big that, just by comparison, everything was small. And it's hard to focus on parts of the business that are, hardly contributing to growth and cash generation. But anyway, that started to shift, and the attention started to shift. We put our efforts and our concentration on different businesses, and that kind of worked. But with that also came the realization that our software stack was not suitable for the type of businesses we wanted to serve. It's monolithic. It's not easy to get it running on different operating systems, so we had to kind of redesign everything, which was okay. It took us probably a year and a half, 2 years. But we got through all that. Became stronger in the business-to-business space. We started to win contracts. Started to build a reputation. for user-friendly software and for, reliable partner. And that helped us. That helped us through. But still, we are a smaller company than we were in the retail heydays. But that's okay. That's fine. So yeah, that's that episode. And again, it wasn't, you never choose for that type of scenario, but we didn't have a choice. We dealt with it. Didn't feel like it was the end of the world, and it was okay.
I'm sure you have to do that. How would you, back to that very first question I asked about yourself, how you describe yourself, how do you describe TomTom today? What does TomTom do?
Yeah, we make maps and applications to use those maps in a meaningful way.
Right, that has not changed.
It hasn't changed.
It's just who you sell them to.
Yeah, and the industry has changed beyond recognition.
How so?
So in silicon, of course, in wireless, that's all now a given. You have wireless connectivity most of the places on the earth. You have silicon that is much more powerful and is still gaining strength, and tools that are much more powerful than they used to be. We have cloud, public cloud now, which allows you to quickly ramp up compute. And then you have new technologies like computer vision and following that machine learning and artificial intelligence now that are also accelerating things. So there's a lot that has changed. On top of that, of course, on the customer side, the requirements are much higher for the type of content that people can use. Our maps are now used more by robots than by humans, which is different. The requirements for self-driving and automated driving and safety are going up all the time, and then those requirements, it's all accelerating. It's going faster than ever before. So we live in a different era.
So what do you think are the challenges of making maps today?
So map making started in Japan, and it was driven by the Japanese automotive industry. They wanted navigation in cars, and it's very hard to find things in big cities in Japan. When, particularly in Europe, the Germans saw that, they said, it's coming, okay, so it's possible we need to do something similar, and they started to kind of seed some money into map-making ventures, and there's all sorts of initiatives going on. One of them was TeleAtlas, which we later bought, and TeleAtlas had to, Alain de Taille, founder of TeleAtlas, they had to kind of work it out from scratch. There were no tools, there was nothing. And how do you do that? This is a massive task. You need to send people everywhere, and you need to collect data from every corner of the earth, digitize it, and test it and whatnot. And highly manual, labor-intense kind of operation. And that has not changed that much until recently. The nature of that work was still very much, we need to find the information and digitize it. And of course, the workflows are more automated, and there's a lot of automation that has taken place. But the essence of map making is still still very labor intense, and with that, there's a high demand for all sorts of data types for walking ways, pedestrians, for parks, for coastlines, for all sorts of information needs to be accurate, and it needs to be accurate to a much higher degree and fresh and whatnot and rich, and we need to cover the whole bloody globe. That was a challenge for us because we were kind of running and spending money to not make a lot of progress relative to competition and relative to Google and others. And we came to the view that we had to change that. And that we could change that by making much better usage of open data and machine-generated data as well. So we have, what has changed now is we have a very active community out there who is making maps for fun and as a leisure, as a kind of an open source project for social hobby reasons.
Are we talking OpenStreetMap?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on one hand, and on the other hand, we have a ton of data that's generated by vehicles and cameras and all sorts of sensors. And that allowed us to redesign and rethink the way we build maps by combining all those what we call super sources into a map that is richer, has more coverage, supports more data types, higher quality, but is also more efficient to build and to maintain through automated processes.
Is that partnerships with the auto manufacturer? Because we have more and more cameras on cars.
Yeah.
And that's where some of that data comes from.
Yeah, some of the data is coming from that angle. We have a ton of GPS traces. That also gives you a lot of information about the road network, where people are going, where they're driving, how fast they're driving, whether there's traffic. And as I said, there's a ton of what we call sensor observations. Sensors that are building cars for automated driving. That's the robot that's taking over. The robot is trying to make sense of the perception, what's going around.
Right.
It can be video or LiDAR or radar, or that kind of stuff. And then there is also the capacity to process all that data using new technologies and cloud compute and whatnot.
Why would the auto manufacturers share that data with you? It seems like from their point of view, it's probably very valuable data. What is the incentive to partner up with a company from their point of view?
So there's a couple of reasons. So first of all, they understand that without the data, it's harder to build products that they need.
The map, you mean?
Yeah.
Or
the maps,
sensor data?
Maps, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's in their interest to have an active, competitive map making industry. And they benefit themselves also from making the data available because they get it back in the product that they couldn't get back otherwise.
Sorry, I'm actually not sure I understand what you mean there. Like on their own, they wouldn't be able to make that?
Yeah, take traffic information. So you have traffic information these days is mostly built from GPS trace data.
Right.
And you need a ton of that data in order to build reliable traffic information. Now, if you are a large car manufacturer, you produce 10 million cars a year, you still don't produce enough cars and enough data to build a traffic product yourself, by yourself.
I see.
And if you can only do it for your home country where you have 40% market share or something like that,
Right.
but then not for North America. So it makes sense. It's a logical behavior to say, okay, I want traffic information. So I have good, reliable traffic information. And in return, but I also will contribute to the quality.
Right. It's like a common goods.
It's kind of a common goods.
I see.
It needs to be negotiated.
I can imagine.
It needs to be compliant with all sorts of security and privacy, legal stuff, all the stuff that consumers these days would expect in terms of protection, privacy, and whatnot. You need to build that in. But then you're creating one of those flywheel effects where everybody's kind of benefiting.
I see. It's not just also a technical problem now, it's a legal one in a way. The expectations have changed a lot. And then one single car manufacturer couldn't do that on their own.
No.
Okay.
No, they can't do it on their own. You need to pull all the data. And there's, and it didn't happen by itself either. I mean, we had to really make availability of our products conditional on the provision of probe data as well. And people got it.
Right.
But they need to go through an extra layer of complexity, like privacy, and the lawyers need to go look and all that bullshit. So, but we've done that now 30, 40 times or so, and we kind of know how to do that.
What makes a good product for those enterprise customers? Because, back to, it seems like that's the common thread that you have across everything you've done.
Yeah.
And doing it for a consumer is probably very different than doing it for these auto manufacturers.
Exactly.
I'm curious, what makes a good product?
And the use cases can be, so the use case defines what a good product is. So you have the data, and so the data component itself is important. So if you have a product for navigation, you need to make sure that the road network is kind of reliable and that you can accurately guide on the road network. If you are more consumer mobile phone type of company, you may have completely different requirements. You may have like Strava, they do running and cycling. They want to have coverage of all the road network is important, but they also need all the traces and the tracks and where people are running is not necessarily where cars are driving, and sometimes it's competing. So they have a completely different set of requirements for a running product or a trail product. Or if you have a social, where is my friend? You want to give the location of your friend context. I'm close to that building, opposite that cafe, on this square, on this bench. Near this path in the woods or across, completely different set. And challenge for us is to figure out what that set in combination looks like, and also find the business case for that. Because if you have a social app and you want to know where all the parks are and whatnot, you want to know that, but you're not going to pay for that a lot of money. You kind of take what's there at a reasonable price. So, and then you have the whole thing about aerial and satellite and layers with weather and pollution. And then you have public transport and where all the train tracks and there's an endless, and then you have automated driving. So not only need to know that there is a road, but I need to know how many lanes and where the boundaries are, where I can cross those boundaries, what an intersection really looks like, how the flows are going, when there's a curve coming, when there is when the road is climbing or descending. I need to know all that. So again, completely different set of requirements. and mostly those. So if you don't if you're a car maker and you do a self-driving car, you need to know how the gradient of a corner, because that kind of defines how fast you can go into that corner, what is safe speed, safe, comfortable kind of speed to get through. But if you say, okay, I want this, then you want it not just for Munich or for Stuttgart, but you want it over the whole bloody world, everywhere where there's. So those are, small things that can have a huge impact on your map and the cost of building the content, and then the ongoing cost of maintaining that content. And that can run out of hand very quickly if you're not careful. And that's why automated map making is so important, because it's only when you have those scalable sources, like sensor observations, that you can economically extract the data, put them in the database, make them available at scale and at known quality.
Right. Is that a single map? Are you trying to make the map, or are they different? Because we talked about many different applications. We talked about Strava, which is for people who run, and then autonomous driving. The requirements are very different, but the world, there's just one world out there. And I'm curious, are you thinking about these in these different applications, or are you just trying to make the best one map that you can?
When we think about those things, we think about market segments and the requirements those market segments have in terms of content and services and whatnot. And we know there is divergence between different segments, and there is a different amount of money available and all the rest of that. And so it's a kind of a multifaceted puzzle that we need to solve one way or another. And then there's another thing, and that we don't want to be a bottleneck. If someone wants to develop and wants to do things, we don't want to be in a position where we have to say, well, sorry, but you can't do that with our map because we don't have it. It's taking too long. It's too expensive. What we do want is to go back to a customer and say, well, if you have that information yourself or you want to acquire it yourself, you can add it. And then, we can't sell it to you because we don't have it. But if you want to do it yourself, you have an economical way of doing it, you can combine that with that map. So more and more we start to think about layers of map data and map content. There's a standard map, which has a lot already. And then you start adding stuff on top of that, where you also want to provide the flexibility to third parties to add their own stuff to that map. And that's why the Overture Foundation is important. So we have decided with a number of industry players that this is kind of a mechanism that we need to enable in order to provide the fuel for innovation, don't be the bottleneck and whatnot. So we have, between us, decided that we will publish the roadmap work, and we keep that stable with stable identifiers. And everybody who wants to build on that map can do that kind of free of charge. It's open source. You take that data, you have your own, you add it to that map, and you have kind of a reference system. You have a canvas for the world, and you can put your own stuff on that, and you can be reasonably sure that of the integrity of that solution, because it does move in an unexpected way, and if it's kind of a solid technical solution to map your own content to a base map. And we think that base map needs to be an open source map. And of course, we have OSM. But what we're adding in the Overture situation is that we do that at quality. So we have all sorts of quality procedures, so you kind of know that the road network works, it's connected, it's coded in a uniform way. There is a defined schema to which that road network is built. Content is still coming from OSM and others, but we have put on top of that kind of a layer of quality control and uniformity.
Yeah, I talked to Mark Priolo, the executive director of Overture, about kind of those differences. Yeah. And so for context, Overture is a joint project between TomTom, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon.
Yeah.
So why make the map for free? Why give the base layer open source? I understood that was kind of the heart of what TomTom was doing. So how do you make money now?
So what we have decided when we looked at the business a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we came to the view we're spending a ton of money on what we call non-differentiated features that are kind of there already out in OSM or anywhere. That's the basis. You can't compete on that. People don't pay a lot of money there. It's kind of that layer is no longer a differentiator. What you want to do is you want to have that layer, but you don't want to spend tons of money to maintain it. You don't want to go to local authorities everywhere in the world to kind of make sure that everything is still correct. You want to do that at scale with super sources, highly automated way. And you want to free up capital and investments for the attributes and the map things that are important, that are innovative, and where customers are prepared to pay money because it enables their applications or robots or self-driving, their thing.
It would, if I understand correctly, it would be things like you talked about this base layer. So I'm guessing it's because there's layers that come on top of it. So this building, that footprint's not going to change very often. It might, but it's not going to change very often. And so you're saying there's not that much value in mapping the building, but the traffic around it is the layer that people are going to be willing to spend money on. And so that's where you're going to focus.
That's a good example.
Okay, great. And why do that with other companies? Why do that through the foundation? Is it the same problem where the auto manufacturers cannot make the traffic information on their own? The map makers can't make the map on their own, so they work together?
Yeah, that is so everybody wants maps and detailed maps, and there is not a single company in the world that can build all the map content in an economical way by themselves. It's kind of the short answer.
I see. No, that's good. What are you... If we look a little bit ahead, you've...
I don't even Google, by the way. Can't even do it.
Yeah, Google and Apple are not part of the Overture. So yeah, TomTom is 32 years old. It's gone through a lot of history. We went through a lot of that. Some ups, some big downs, a few of those. The tech has changed a lot. The products has changed a lot. What are you excited about? After having done all of this, looking ahead, we've talked a little bit about like what TomTom is doing today. What are you excited about right now that keeps you going, keeps you excited about the journey that TomTom's on? So
4 years ago, we decided, we were in kind of a difficult spot. As I said, we invested a lot of money, not making loads of progress. Where in terms of map quality, where the requirements are going up and up and up and up. I think we figured out a way to be really relevant in the mapping world going forward and become we are an important player already. We have significant market share in the mapping world. I think in the commercial mapping world, as we know, we have about 40% market share, I reckon, between here and Mapbox and others. Depends a little bit how you define the market, but that's approximately how we look at it. So we are a meaningful player. But I think that we've now laid the foundation for more impact to come and more faster development, better being able to serve the needs of our customers and grow with our customers, enable our customers, rather than slowing them down by saying this is not ready, this is too expensive, this is too hard, and whatnot. So having created now kind of a platform and an approach where we can truly enable innovation and speed and velocity and help, and play a role in that automated driving, that safety, that congestion thing, and whatnot. I think there's and also entering new business segments, new territories. Our maps are now better in countries where we didn't spend a lot of money, like Latin America and Africa, and some countries in Southeast Asia as well, Middle East. We have a much better product offering where we can now also are much more relevant for businesses that have international businesses that are present in all those countries and need kind of a similar level of quality in all those countries. Plus the role we play in the forefront of automation in vehicles, self-driving and routing and traffic information. It's a cool place to be. And that industry is cool. And that industry is going through a lot of change, and there's a lot of clever people, a lot of smart thinking, a lot of progress, and I really feel it's really fun to be part of the conversation and help drive that conversation and learning. And that is from, when I was a young kid, I come from a village not far from here. I think one of the things I worked out for myself at an early age is that I wanted to travel and develop an international kind of perspective and an international career. And I've pulled that off. But still to this day, being part of that international community of technologists and product people and industrialists and entrepreneurs is really fun.
Yeah.
I like it. And I'm not the only one. I've noticed that a lot of people kind of infected with the map virus stay in that mapping world. They move around, do different things and look at different areas and whatnot. But somehow it keeps pulling and has a huge pull factor, this whole geolocation and geo world. It's an interesting bunch, an interesting set of people who set the pace and the tone of the conversation.
Do you have any idea why that is? I've noticed that. There's a bit of survivorship bias, and some of the people I end up talking to is people who have been around for a little bit longer. But why do you think that is the case?
So maps have always attracted the bright and beautiful people. So it's always been attractive. Maps have always been attractive. Exploring, finding new frontiers. From very early on in the history of mankind, maps played a very important. You see maps on this old frescoes and things that go back thousands of years. Various things are located. It kind of appeals directly, I think, to something that's very deep in our nature. Where are we? Where can we go? What can we explore? What's around the corner? How do I get there? They're beautiful to look at. People can look at maps, planning their holidays for hours. The old paper map that we used when we went on holiday when I was a kid were truly inspiring and kind of cool to figure out how to plan your route and how to get to your destination and all the rest of it. So I think it's kind of deeply ingrained. It's highly visual. And then, so I think that's one of the reasons. And then the actual technology to build them is cool, and there's a lot of progress and a lot of new ideas and a lot of innovation taking place in the space as well.
You ever take a moment every once in a while to look at the map and for like the visual, the beautiful thing it is?
Yeah, I do, because I know this is an important aspect. The visual aspect is kind of an important element in the branding of your product.
Yeah,
that's what people see. You can have terrific content if you can't visualize it. People will struggle to recognize the beauty of it all. So, visualization is an important aspect, and we've probably. We're on the right track now. We've probably underinvested a little bit, and we're catching up very quickly now in making that again top of mind, and with a lot more to play with. The maps are richer, getting more information, and visualizing that is a key element of what we're doing.
I want to start closing the loops that we opened earlier. You said you were an entrepreneur. Kind of accidentally stumbled on the maps. What do you have any advice for people who would describe themselves in that same way, who have ideas, who want to change things, who want to become entrepreneurs, mapping or not? Because there are a lot of tech companies in the world, but there's not that many that have been around this long at this point. You're still at the head of the company. You're the founder. That's also not something. There's not a lot of people in the role in the shoes that you have. So I'm curious. Do you think about that, about the next generation of people who might dream about those things? What would you tell them?
Well, so here's the funny thing. I don't know, I'm not 100% sure about the statistics and what I'm saying is actually correct or not. But it's probably, if you want to get rich, you probably better you better go to the casino, put all your money on red. I think the chances that you get rich out of a casino are probably higher than getting rich out of entrepreneurship. And even if the stacks in the casino are against you, I would think that the chances you make it as a starter in a meaningful way are not that high. And some of the statistics seem to, I don't know, you read different statistics in different countries and the way you measure it. But I think by and large, what is it, 5% or so of companies survive and do shit and make an impact. That's probably skewed towards the lower end, because the people who fail in a first venture can really make it in a second venture or become more effective in the work they do. When they are working for a boss or in a larger organization. What I'm saying is, if you just do it for the money, then it's probably not a good idea. That is probably not the right motivation. But the rewards are very significant if you do it, because it's fun and it's crazy, and you assume a level of responsibility for your own doing that you don't get into working for a boss, or hard. It's harder to get that. And it is phenomenally rewarding if it works. Either it works a little bit, is even much more rewarding than I'm not even talking about building a billion or a multi-billion dollar company. Even at a small scale, doing something for yourself and running that and being responsible for that and is already a massive achievement, and can be a great source of joy and satisfaction. So, but it's also, it's also quite hard. At times it's tough. And there's a lot at stake in many cases, especially if you're a bit older, you have a family, you have a house, you have a mortgage, you have kids and whatnot. Losing a lot of money is not so funny anymore and can create a lot of stress and anxiety. I don't think there is a silver bullet. There's no recipe that fits all. What a good start is if you have real deep knowledge about a certain industry and you are aware of certain problems that exist in that industry and where you have an idea how to fix that and be passionate about it. That's a reasonable start to think about entrepreneurship. I have this plan. I see this going wrong. This can be done a different way. That's a good start. But even if you see a hole in the market, that doesn't mean there is a market in that hole. And it's tough, and you need a bit of luck, and your time needs to be right. It's one of the most important things, most difficult things you need to do. It's always takes longer than you think. So you need to be. There are things you can do in order to enhance your chances. Doing it needs to come from kind of an inner conviction that you are smarter than everybody else in the globe, even if you know that it's kind of objectively that's not at all the case. But you need to have that level of conviction that you're going to fix this, you're going to do it, and everybody else, all the naysayers, that is at the same time it's a problem, because if you think you're smarter than everybody else, you don't listen, and that means you make very stupid mistakes. So finding the right balance between having the conviction that you know better, you need to balance that with an ability to listen and observe what's happening around you. There are entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs who scale, have problems that other entrepreneurs have in exactly the same way, maybe a different area, different field, but you can learn from that. I'm a fan of mentoring and coaching in that respect. Okay. If you have the time, if you have the attention span, people around you, that's a fantastic way to avoid stupid mistakes. So, and don't run out of cash.
Sounds like pretty good advice.
Don't run out of cash.
I like starting with the same question. I like ending these conversations the same way as well, with the same question. I like asking people for a recommendation of a book and a podcast, if you listen to any. As you can imagine, I'm a big fan of podcasts and books. There's a few reasons why I asked this. The first one is I think they kind of help grasp people a little bit more, depending on what they read, the influences they have. And the other is that books and podcasts still both travel through word of mouth, and I like hearing about new things. So there's something that has been influential that you read recently that you think is worth people hearing about. It doesn't have to be about anything we talked about.
In terms of reading, I have a kind of a broad interest. I read about different topics. Economics I like because that's how I've been trained. I like history. I'm not so keen on those management books, to be honest.
It seems like you didn't really need them anyways.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a difficult relationship with management books. But what I really like is history, current affairs, politics, business in general, industry, how that develops. I think the last book I read with a lot of actually I haven't finished it, but I'm in the middle of it. Is a book about Napoleon, the emperor, who wasn't as short as the Brits wanted to make us believe. who was kind of the first European out there. Not very well understood, and I think there was a lot of interesting stuff there in that is how Europe came together and the politics of it all and the progress we've made since that time. So I thought that was an interesting one.
Do you recall the name of that one?
No, I don't. I will look it up for you, so you can maybe you can pass it in the podcast. Yeah. So that's really. I'm not. I don't find it. I found it hard enough to find time to read books. Quite frankly, podcast is not really my thing.
Fair enough.
I like it, participating, and every now and then there's a lot of good stuff out there. I have to say, but somehow I don't find the concentration. I think
fair enough.
I just spend a lot of time on them.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and it's nice to have this conversation. I mean. I don't do it often to reflect on the past. I prefer to live in the future and tackle the challenges ahead of it rather than contemplating about the past achievements and failures. But it's kind of cool. And and I don't know, you're probably a bit younger than I am, but going back to the early 90s when there was hardly anything in the computer sense or tech, it wasn't the word. Startup was the word. It's kind of cool to have to bring that back up and think about it. I'm not sure how interesting that is for the average listener now. That is, let's say, millennium or whatever. But having been part of that journey and still playing my role in that. In shaping that future is a great gift.
I appreciate you sharing that story. I'm gonna ask one last question, I promise. I asked you earlier, is there anything that you've been wanting to talk about that you might not have had an opportunity to talk about? You told me to have a think about it. Is there anything that came to mind?
No, I think
that's fine.
I think I've been able to express my ideas and my feelings and my experience. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your valuable time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.